we're getting at the point here, which is the aesthetic of Demon Souls was not straightforward. He's not called the Storm King because he literally causes a storm. The Shrine of Storms was not destroyed because it, like, was on fire. Like, the fire is a very literal representation, a very, very straightforward representation of destruction. Where what the Shrine of Storms was a place that was sort of ambiently destroyed. You weren't in a place that felt like it had been fucking recently nuked. It was just a place that had kind of fallen apart. And it's like, why? Oh, and here's Tower Knight. So for this one, Tower Knight is like the second boss you fight by most playthroughs. So here's what Tower Knight looks like in the original. I hope this looks proper. Now you see he's sort of shadowed, right? The walls are very bare. They're very, like, green toned. There's just like there's a bad atmosphere going on here. It looks grimy. This looks like a fucking Disneyland park. This looks like Disneyland. It's like here. Okay, we have this high depth of field, this high contrast lighting, where you look at the background and it's like it's so blown out, and it makes everything in the foreground look darker by comparison. It's like this blinding light. And here it's like, oh, it's sunny but overcast. You know? Oh, you can see Tower Knight very, very clearly. He looks like a Gundam. Because the lighting just doesn't work. It's like the type of thing where I look at it and I go, it's higher polygon count, the textures are more detailed, but you've taken a composition which is white, green, and gray, and you've turned it into, like, blue and yellow and silver, and there's no shadows to it, and, like, harsh shading was so important. It contributes to this important dreamlike atmosphere that Demon's Souls has, that none of the other Souls games have, where it's glowy, it's ambient, it's like you're asleep and something in your dream wants to kill you. You know? And so just I don't get it. Why take this composition, which is so deliberate? It's so, like, you can see the intent in this frame with the blown out overexposed sky and the sort of blur around the Tower Knight coming from the lighting on him. And it's like, he's Gundam now. And the second important thing, we look at, like, this foreground. We see all this foliage. We see vines growing on the walls. Boletaria, where Demon Souls takes place, the impression has come from the Dark Souls games that these games are about ancient destroyed kingdoms, which isn't the premise of Demon Souls. In case you haven't played it, Demon Souls, basically a giant plague, a giant fog goes over the land and starts summoning demons, and it's just like expanding and expanding. And it's taken up this entire kingdom of Boletaria. And so very recently, like within a few years, people have evacuated, and they're essentially sending explorers in to go find out what the fuck is in here, what's going on, how can we stop this from spreading. Demon's Souls is not post-apocalyptic. You're not exploring an ancient land. You're literally, like, going into, like, a place that was evacuated due to a plague, and poking around and seeing what happened in here. This type of vegetation and decay and the crumbling infrastructure, it's not 200 years old, man. There are castles today that look less fucked up than this, with, like, minimal maintenance. Like, I don't know, it's hard, it's really weird, and it sounds nitpicky, but this is not... It only suits the setting if your impression of the setting is ancient abandoned palace, rather than what it actually is. That and just, I ask a question of, you see, there's no grass here, it's just the ground. You look at the walls, they're just bare palace walls. The question is why add banners and foliage? And it really is something where it just seems like the visual designers said, oh, there's nothing on that wall? Put something on that wall for me. Like, we want more stuff on the walls so that it looks, you know, more visually busy. And it's like, it's so distracting from the frame. It's like, again, with the ambient occlusion, not ambient occlusion, but like depth of field, the blown out sky, the very drab, bare walls. Like, the focus of the shot is Tower Knight. He's the only thing you can pay attention to in this shot. Because he, in terms of color and in terms of decoration, just stands out from everything else. In this shot, he might as well just be a statue. Like, this could just be a statue. I look at this and I'm like, oh fuck, it's a giant knight. In this, I'm like, is that just a big knight statue? Because it's like, you know, there's decorations on the walls. There's nice fucking carvings in the banisters. There's really decorative carvings. It's like, what? It's so... And like, everything is the same color as the Tower Knight. There's, like, things... There's literally just, like, grass that's blocking your full view of him. And I don't want to... I don't want this to be the whole stream. But this is what Bluepoint did to Shadow of the Colossus. Let me look this up for you. I have some fucking images. Look at this. Like, it's like they didn't get it. It's like the most literal interpretation. And Shadow of the Colossus and Demon's Souls are not literal games. Like, why do this? Like, if you want to, like, I can debate about the facial structure of the character. I'd say that in the original he looks a bit less like a standard human. He's got a little bit of a weird, uncanny look to him. But you know what? I'm willing to say, like, fine, just make a photorealistic sort of model for the character from Shadow of the Colossus. But, like, you take that and the lighting is... It's the same problem. Overexposed, blown out, blurry lighting off in the distance that makes it look hazy and like a dream and otherworldly. Same thing with Shadow of the Colossus here. Like, hazy. It's like this blaring light on his face that makes his skin look like it's too pale to be a person. it's like harsh and weird, and it makes the landscape look barren and desolate. You can see that in this screenshot too. And then you go to the right, and it's like, oh, it just looks like a 3D render that someone did in fucking Blender for like a student project. Same thing here. It's like, this just looks like, genuinely, it looks like those things where people just stick Mario in an Unreal Engine like test field. Open image. It looks like this shit to me. It's like, what? Did you miss the point? Did you not get it? How hard do you have to miss a fucking point? And they did. And it's like, if they were doing this with some random game that I, like, whatever, I wouldn't care. But, like, it's Shadow of the Colossus and Demon's Souls, which are, like, two of the most remarkable, important games of the 2000s. And just, like, video games in general. And it's like, what the fuck? And I made a tweet about this. I made a comedic little fucking tweet about this. It's like the Half-Life 2 cinematic mod. Where it's just, like, they took the thing and put plants on it. Because they thought adding plants made it look more realistic or some shit like that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't add anything. If a game like Mario 64 was remade, would you want everything to look just as blocky? Not necessarily blocky, but let's say, I mean, Mario games still come out, right? Let's look at some Mario Odyssey screenshots. Like, look at Mario Odyssey. It's like, this, if Mario 64 were made today, this is what it would look like. Yeah, there's like grass and vines and stuff, but that's because it's a naturalistic looking environment. It's an environment designed to look kind of like a factory that's overgrown. You know, like it isn't photoreal. It's not like it's not low res. It's not low poly. It looks cartoony because it's fucking Super Mario Brothers. Where's Brawl Mario? It's like fucking Brawl Mario. It's like, I don't need to see the fucking denim on his jacket. I don't need to see the seams of his overalls or the contours of his face. They just put a little bit, like, oh, you can see where his overalls are sewn up. It's like, you know, that's just a little bit of detail to flex, like, ooh, look at our new engine. Oh, it's been a long time since Mario 64, hasn't it? But it's not like this. And it's like, you know, this is a Wii fucking model. This is a Wii render of Mario. And it has more complex detail on it, but the complex detail isn't a result of having more technology. It's just a result of shitty visual design. It's like, you know, and the weirdest thing about Mario 64 is the humans, not Mario 64, about Mario Odyssey is like the realistic looking humans. It is strange, but it's like, it's not this. And of course it's not as extreme as this, but the principle is, I feel, is the same, where it's just like slapping things into the image without consideration for what the visual style was intending to convey. And it's because it's subtle that people don't think about it, right? Like, open image in new tab. Like, look at this Colossus and this Colossus. They look different, right? You know, they look subtly different. You can obviously tell, but explaining why they're so different is why I wish I were a visual artist. Because here you have the sky and the Colossus are so, like, they sort of blend into a shape. Like, the Colossus is, they're like, they look like they're of the same. I don't know. I wish I could explain this, but it's like the sky and the Colossus look as though they are cut from the same cloth. The Colossus is like sort of an almost unitone color. It's just this dark gray thing, this mass against a light gray sky that looks like it's like a part of the land in a way. And this Colossus on the right here is just like, there's his fur, and there's his belly, and here's his bicep, and here's his nose, and you can see him clearly separated from the sky because there's no depth of field. And it's like, man, it's a subtle thing that changes. And Shadow of the Colossus is a big example for me, because I remember being very young, and you used to get these demo discs in the mail. I got a PS2 demo disc. And it had the first Colossus from Shadow of the Colossus on it. That was the whole demo. But you started in the shrine. They put you on your horse. They let you find your way to the Colossus, and you could just wander around some of the open world. You could pick up some of the fruit. You could just do a little bit of the first, like hour of Shadow of the Colossus. And even though I didn't play the game properly for years and years after getting that demo disc, like it is the thing. It's like the defining moment where I realized, like, the artistic and aesthetic and potential scope of video games. Like playing this game when I was like 8 years old, and just like looking at this image on the left and being like, holy shit, like, look at this image. And it's that's obviously such an anecdotal thing, but it's just different. It's just not it's not capturing that same tone. I don't know. There's a whole rest of the trailer to get to, so I'm gonna stop talking about Tower Knight specifically. But this thing, I don't know. I don't really care about this thing. I don't remember the shot very well, but I remember it not being this dark. Flame Lurker. So you can argue for the Tower Knight and just say it just looks nicer. I like that they added the plants, whatever. It's not. It's a subtle change in visual design that despite my strong preference for the original, that I'm willing to look at this one. That I'm willing to look at the new Tower Knight and just say, like, I get it. Like, I get why some people think that looks better. I extremely disagree, but I get it. But Flame Lurker here is Diablo, and let's pull up a picture of the original Flame Lurker. This is Flame Lurker. It is a completely different design. He's completely redesigned on a visual standpoint. He's sort of rocky. He's got these horns. He's got sort of a bony face structure. Whereas here, he's just kind of weird liquid flame flesh. He's kind of got a skull. And even more so, I will say, what was wrong with this design that you changed it? Like, why'd you... Like, even if you think this looks better, which is, like... It's subjective whether or not these two images look... Which of these designs is better. But it's not subjective that they are different designs. And, like... What was the logic? What board meeting was held where they said, okay, this design is unacceptable. We can't have this in the game. But this, putting Diablo in. And if I were to think as a visual designer, and I were to think about a creature, it's like, okay, what is the intent of Flame Lurker? To be a scary, flame monster that attacks you. Oh, scary flame monster that attacks you. That makes me think of Diablo. Let's pull up a picture of Diablo here, just for reference. Let's pull up Diablo. It's like, oh, it's literally just Diablo. Whereas, and I'll argue, even just not talking about like quality, but uniqueness. I have trouble finding you a monster which is like a flaming, fleshy monster with like sort of a skull for a head, but the skull is also flesh, and it's got big chompy teeth and like a weird cage in front of its mouth. I could find you a billion of these. This is in every D&D book. Every fucking monster manual for every fantasy RPG ever made looks like this. They have these. This is unique to Demon Souls. This is from Demon Souls, and that is all it is from. And so when you show me this, I'm just like, you just look. I don't get it. I don't get it. Why change it? Why change it so significantly? It's the same thing as the gargoyles, except even worse because this is a boss. A memorable boss. A boss that everyone talks about. When people talk about like the more memorable bosses in Demon Souls, they talk about Flame Lurker because he's fucking hard. But not just because he's hard, but because he jumps all over the place. He's this crazy lava man. I just... Beyond me just thinking it looks worse, it makes me think remakes are basically inherently made for the fans. At least when you recreate a game in the way that Bluepoint does, which Shadow of the Colossus, they added like a little bit of new content here and there, but it's effectively just the same game, but new engine, new graphics. Same as the Crash remakes, same as the Spyro remakes. And when you remake a game in that way, it's inherently appealing to the fans of the original. Like, that's the target audience 100% of the time when you remake a game in that way. And so you're going to remake a game in a way that appeals specifically to the original audience, and then just change a bunch of shit? You know? Like, the Resident Evil 2 game... The Resident Evil 2 remake was a really different game from the original, in a way that I'd say it was clearly intended to appeal to a new audience first and foremost. They changed the tone, they changed the aesthetic, they changed the camera, they changed the combat, they changed basically everything, but just kept the map layout and sort of worked from the concept of like horror game in a spooky police department. So like when they make changes, it's like fine, whatever. Like it's effectively just a different game. But this is effectively replacing the original. That's the intent of a remake of this style, is to say it's the same game, but it runs better and it's got new graphics. And it's like, if you're gonna do that, why are you changing shit? There's no payoff to it. There's nothing to gain by turning Flame Lurker into Diablo. It doesn't improve anything. Is the game gonna be better because Flame Lurker looks like Diablo now? Like, no. Even if I did think his design was better than the original Flame Lurker, I'd be like, this doesn't make the game any better. And Final Fantasy VII Remake, okay, you're asking about Final Fantasy VII Remake. I don't care about Final Fantasy, right? Like, I've played maybe a couple hours of the original. I played the demo of the new one and thought that was cool. And then I started hearing about how they changed a lot of things. And I tweeted it out a couple times. You might not have seen that, but it's like yeah, they changed the combat system, they changed the camera angle, they changed the aesthetic, they changed the hub world, they changed the quests, they changed the writing, they changed everything, and just kept it in the world of Final Fantasy VII with the basic structure of Final Fantasy VII. So it's like it's functionally a different game that's just coming from the same premise. So when they change things, it's like, well, if you have a problem with them changing the story just by virtue of the fact that it's different, why don't you have a problem with them changing the combat just by virtue of the fact that it's different? Right? Because it is such a different game. Now, if you say the writing was bad, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you that you're not allowed to think Final Fantasy has bad fucking writing. But it's like, if you just dislike it because it's a different thing and what you wanted was a straight remake, I'm just like, well, look at this shit. Look what happens when they make a straight remake. They fuck things up anyway. They change things unnecessarily regardless. I'd just rather... I think remakes are contentious. Obviously, I made a video about this, so I'm really not sure how I feel about remakes conceptually. I think at the end of the day, it would be best if maybe we just didn't have remakes, and instead, when someone thinks, what if I remake that game? They instead think, what if I take the things that inspire me to want to remake that game and make something new out of those instead? I think that would be a better artistic approach, but I'm willing to accept, for financial reasons, for practical reasons, that remakes get made. And so just like fucking the closest thing to that concept of making a new thing is essentially Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like, okay, we give you your fan service, we give you your Cloud, your Tifa, your Aerith, we give you your Buster Sword, but we're gonna do a new thing with it because the original already exists. There's nothing stopping you from playing the original. It's widely available. We're gonna make something new, and I'm like, that's about as close as it gets. You know, like that's fine. But this is just, it's just fucking. We're gonna take Demon Souls and we're gonna make the exact same game again. But just, like, change stuff at random, and this gets tweaked here, and this gets turned there, for no particular benefit and no particular detriment, except that if you liked the old thing, it's different now. It's like, it's so nonsensical. It's so weird. I don't know. So, I mean, again, with Final Fantasy VII Remake, I will tell you that I like Metal Gear Solid 2 a lot, and that is a game that fucked with you on purpose, and which pretty deliberately lied in all of its advertising. So, like, I don't know, I'd approve of Tetsuya Nomura fucking pissing in people's mouths if I thought it was an interesting artistic statement. You know what I mean? Like... I think that would be fine, but I get that I'm kind of extremist on that. But it's just like, I'll take it. I get why people would be mad, but I do think that you have to temper that and say, is it good on its own merits rather than just, was it warranted in the first place? Because that's really the only standard I can judge remakes with. At this point, is it's such a complicated concept that I'm just like, is it good? Yeah, if it's good, then whatever. Resident Evil 2 Remake, like, oh, is it faithful to the original? Oh, does it live up to the original? And I'm like, it's just good. Fine. And this is like, will it be good? Sure, it'll probably be a good game. But that's because Demon Souls was a good game. And this is just Demon Souls with different graphics. You don't get fucking points for that. All right, let's move on from Diablo 3 Flamemarker. I think that might have been the last of it that I cared to even talk about. We got Dragon God, whatever. It's Dragon God. That is probably the point I wonder about the most, is things like Dragon God, where it was a weird experimental idea that didn't pan out. I'm perfectly willing to say that Dragon God didn't work as an encounter. And it's like, it goes back to the warts and all problem, where you question, should they change things that were bad and risk and ultimately be making a separate product? Or should they just leave it? Just leave it and say, this is the game that was made, it's fine. Given that they're changing visual design, I would lean towards, you should probably just change it. If you're going to change one thing arbitrarily, you might as well change something else for a reason. Something that didn't work, but I don't know. It's just fucking, like, why? It's just a rabbit hole of, well, if you're going to change that, then why not change this? And if you're going to change this and this and this and this and this, why not just make a different video game? But yeah, I don't know. I can't see myself buying this game. And I say that as a person who really, really likes the original Demon's Souls and really respects it a lot as a video game. And so, I don't know. It's just fucked up. Bluepoint is doing this with a lot of video games at this point. Ugh. Do you feel as if Bluepoint cares less of the games they were making and sees it as more of a chance to show off? It's weird, because Bluepoint did the HD Shadow of the Colossus Ico collection. And so I have to think that they give a shit about these games. Like, I'm not going to say that I think the original, that Bluepoint has ill intent. Like, they're obviously not like, oh, I don't give a fuck about this game, just try to make it look nice. I just think they're genuinely misguided and like, I don't know. It's just that, and I don't want to be the guy. I don't want to be Mr. Portbeggar, because that shit is annoying. But what I kind of expected out of Demon's Souls at this point was a PC release. Not because I'm like, oh, I only want to play on PC, but because I care about the preservation of the game. And at this point, you have to understand that remastering or remaking a game in this very literal way and then just putting it on a new console is like, in another 10 years it's just going to need another port, right? If you don't put it on fucking PC where it can be preserved by at least the fans, it's just like, fuck off. I'll just play the original Demon's Souls. I still own it. The servers are down, but it's not like I really cared that much about the online. We gotta move on from Demon's Souls. It's too upsetting to me. It's too frustrating, not upsetting.